Hey everybody, this is Steve Kozar. I want to play an interview that I just recorded with my friend Mark Mack in Redding, California. He was an elder at Bethel going back to the late 1990s. He started attending Bethel way back in 1988. He has a long history with the church and has a lot of interesting things to say about some of the things that he's seen over the years that have gone wrong. And this is a show, but it's really just a conversation. And I didn't do any fancy editing. I don't even have an official starting point. I just clicked record and we started talking. And I think it's just fine that way. Please listen to the whole thing and have an open mind. And I hope you find this very helpful. Let's start recording to see what we got.
Okay. Uh, just the stuff was going through me, all that stuff that I've held in my memory, it's now surfacing. So that's going to cause some emotion and stuff like that.
Do you feel like at the time those things took place that you were kind of pushing the emotions away and trying to make yourself
Yeah,
feel better?
I think that would be accurate.
Yeah,
And then trying to subdue the emotions that I was feeling that, hey, something's not right here,
right.
But like we talked about on the phone earlier was that, that desire to belong to something that you think is greater than you, or I don't know how to describe it, but it's just um, so anyway. I'm really kind of putting down all this stuff on the laptop and the paper is really kind of like this. I don't want to say therapy, but it sure
No,
does feel.
I've heard that over and over again that it is therapeutic to journal about your feelings and your experiences so that you kind of deal with them. So
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that at all.
So I'm hoping what I wrote and sent to you was coherent.
Yeah, it was.
Um, but again, I'm just uh, probably maybe covered about 10%, maybe about everything that I personally saw. That's not even. I'm trying to not even cover what's hearsay. Someone told me this about this. I'm not even going to go there because
Yeah.
I'm just telling you what this is my personal experience that I had. At Bethel, um, what's going on, what I saw there, and that kind of thing. And like that's gosh, almost 34 years now
Let me do an
of that.
intro here.
Okay.
I don't do this ever, so I don't have an intro planned. But hey, everybody, this is Steve Kozar. I'm here with Mark Mack in Redding, California. Are you in the city of Redding?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yep.
And we're going to be talking about your experience over, what did you just say, 34 years?
Yeah.
30?
1988 is when we moved to Reading. Yeah. And we attended Bethel about April of that year. So 34 years.
And you're going to kind of give, we could call this sort of an inside scoop, some of the things going on behind the scenes to give people a better impression of. This is one of my pet peeves about American evangelicalism as a whole is that you can market a version of your church that really is just a, facade. It's not the real church. It's not the real stuff going on. And
Yeah.
that's pretty much the case in almost every church, really, if you think about it. But
Yeah.
with the use of marketing techniques, the version of Bethel that people are seeing online, uh, it's not the real Bethel.
Yeah.
And you were there as a
Yeah.
leader in the old
Yeah.
days in the 1990s. So when you contacted me earlier in this year, I thought this could be really interesting, and we've had a chance to talk for a number of hours here and there since then. And it seems like you know people like me. I went to a church that was influenced by Bill Johnson and influenced by some of the teachings at
Oh,
Bethel, and so I was going to the source. I was listening to Chris Valentin. I was listening to Bill Johnson. I was reading what they said. I was listening to what they said, and I
yeah.
was critiquing what they said. And
Yeah.
that's totally valid. But there are certain people who will say, "Well, you weren't there. You don't really know what was going on. You don't know the real story because you didn't talk to them in person." Well, that's why I've got you here today. You were there. You know these guys up close and personal.
Yeah. You mentioned something about what people see on YouTube or iBethel TV, and what I like to tell folks, and that whole sanctuary is the size of a basketball gym. I mean, they do a really good job of making it look, their camera angles and their lighting, but it's basically the size of your high school basketball gym in your local town. Um, and then, um, and then secondly is I've had people discuss, well, and people know I don't agree with what I'm hearing coming out of Bethel right now. It was, and I apologize if I'm rambling along, but I had some suspicions, I had some feelings, I just had some things that made me go, "What?"
Mm-hmm.
Um, for example, Chris Valentin saying that we're gods with a little G, he's God with a big G. I was there at that first service when he said that, and I went, "Yeah, well, that's in the Bible in Genesis, where the serpent tells Eve, yeah, you will become like a god, and I'm so all this stuff, and then it wasn't until a couple of years ago when I saw the documentary American Gospel that it all just went boom, and I went, oh yeah. And then I saw the video that segment of Todd White and the leg lengthening and the manipulating. I went, oh, okay. So I started following you guys' chant, um, Daniel Long, Justin Peters, Fighting for the Faith. Yeah, Chris Roseborough. I thought, okay. And the more and more I watched, the more and more it just kind of confirmed that there's something not right here. Um, I'm still a member of Bethel Church. I'm an official member, and so two things. People don't. They question me, why are you still a member? And there's a couple of reasons. Some of those reasons may not be the most noble of, but I'm like, well, they're either going to have to excommunicate me, shun me, or kick me out because I'm the firefighter that's in the building that's on fire yelling, get out, get out, get out.
Hmm.
And then, people are like, no, you need to leave. And I'm like, well, I've got people that I really love there
Hmm.
that I am friends with. And maybe after this, the relationship will change.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But, most people, if the building's on fire, they're going to run out. I run in and I help them get out. And that's
So for
how I look
people who
at it.
don't know, you are a firefighter and have been
Yes.
a professional firefighter.
I was
Firefighter.
fighter for 30, almost a little over 30 years. I retired 7 years ago. Um, so yeah, my background is because of my job in the fire department, I worked for the state of California. We moved to Redding in 1988 from a job transfer. Uh, my wife found Bethel, and we attended there. I was a different pastor besides Bill. Bill came in 1996, and uh, his message to us was he was going after more of God, and he was going to pursue revival. That sounds great. Who doesn't want to learn more about God?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, Lord. And then uh, a couple of months after he got here, he asked me to be on the board of elders. At that time, it was a 3-year commitment. The congregation voted whether or not you would serve or not, and so I did that for 3 years. And during that time of '96 to about 2000, we were starting to have the Wes and Stacy Campbell, the John and Carol Arnott's, the Jim Galls, the early, they would call it renewal back then. But they were the early gang or version or first generation of what that was. Randy Clark came, and I think it was when Randy Clark first came where I heard that, how many are you feeling 25 to 50% better, wave your hand at me. And I'm like, I never seen this in the Bible. And I don't know if you're familiar with how he does that.
Right.
If you're feeling 50% better, wave your hand, and then okay, keep waving your hand. We'll go after your healing. And I'm like, I just don't see Jesus doing that anywhere in the Gospels, or the apostles doing that. And it's just like, this is weird. After Randy came, the emphasis shifted from pursuing more of God and revival to physical healing, signs and wonders, to almost that was all they talked about.
Well, at the church here in Madison, Wisconsin that I was attending, this would be 8 years ago, 8 or 10 years ago. I remember hearing about this church, with Bill Johnson, and how healing was happening every day. It was just a normal thing. Every day there was healings. And I remember there was a part of me that thought, really? Is that actually true? Or is that just like a catchphrase that people are repeating because they heard somebody else say it? And I kept thinking about, if that's true, wouldn't there be more than just people saying it? There would be footage of it. There would be video after video after video. They would put out a new video every single day of all the miracles if it was actually happening like they said it was. And then I remember them saying how something about they're going to change the city. There's not going to be any crime anymore. And I remember thinking, well, all you got to do is talk to the police department. How hard would it be to find out if crime has ended in Reading? And I kept thinking, is anybody objectively checking on this stuff? And of course, later on, I wound up doing those sorts of things and finding out that no, there's no objective, verifiable proof to any of these claims. They just keep making these claims and hoping that nobody checks on them.
Yeah. And this is just from my viewpoint. I would argue that there is not healing every day. True physical healing. People probably feel better, and that goes down as a healing. The people that waved their hands at that first, that went down as a healing. And like I know you talk about it, Justin Peters talks about it. Most of that, 99%, is up here.
Right. And that's not saying that the people don't actually feel better. Psychosomatic healing is real healing to an extent. Your nerves are affected by your brain. And so we really can make ourselves feel better. There's scientific evidence of that. It's not like, we're saying, you people are a bunch of, you're living in an imaginary world. No, we believe you when you say you feel better.
Yes.
But that's different than, my bone was broken to, and now my bone is connected again. That would be a real, there's a million different physical healings that would actually be provable, by x-rays or something like that.
And I don't know of, I'm not totally 100% sure, but I don't personally know of anything where someone came up and said, okay, I got prayer for cancer, and here's the doctor's report, and I'm cancer free. And there wasn't any other type of therapy that for my example, 2.5 years ago, I got a cancer diagnosis. So I asked people to pray for me from Bethel, other friends. I was like, I'll take prayer. I'll take as much as I could get. But I also went and looked at other avenues of treatment and wound up going to Spain and getting people call it alternative treatments. I call it options. Firefighters love options. There's more than one way to put out a fire. And since that treatment in Spain, I'm 100% cancer free.
Wow.
Okay, so someone could say, oh, that is a healing of cancer from Bethel. No, people prayed for me at Bethel, but I went and saw this doctor, and he's the one that got me to where I am today. So I think a lot of these testimonies are, I don't want to say bogus, but they're enhanced, and there's not everything. And people that would say, oh, you're questioning, I said, yeah, I am, because what I read in the Gospels, Jesus told the lepers, go to the priest and get checked out.
Yeah.
and he wasn't afraid to have his works examined. So anyway, that was a little bit of a rabbit trail.
Yeah, and I,
Uh,
I, I think we could both say that we're not saying that God doesn't heal people at
oh
times.
yeah,
Absolutely, He does.
yeah,
But He doesn't promise that I will heal everybody all the time, just exactly the way you command it to happen,
yeah,
which is one of the most
yeah,
offensive things I see in the teaching at Bethel. This idea that we almost control God, like God's a puppet, and we
yeah.
have our hand and we're saying, God, do this, God, do that, and we command Him. It's really offensive.
It is. I don't mean to laugh. It's just these declarations and decrees. And the biggest one that I get just is that offering readings they do
Yeah.
every service. And I did a parody of, what are we really saying, type thing. And a lot of people laughed, a lot of people didn't laugh. And I'm like, whatever, it's just like, like they say jobs and better jobs. And I say, you realize you have to go to work to do that. Raises and bonuses. That means you have to do well at your current job to get those raises. It just doesn't happen. And
And it might be that for some people, hearing that encourages them to do those very things. To be fair, it's
yeah,
not bad to say you should want to, if possible, get a better job and try harder and
try harder.
be the best you can be. Those things are all good, but it's the whole commanding thing, as if
Yes.
you are calling forth something with the
Yeah.
power of your words. That's the word of
Yeah.
faith heresy that makes it seem like when God speaks things into existence, that means that we can do the same thing, which
Yeah.
no, we can't call things into existence. That's God's
Yeah.
job. We're not God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I nickname it the chant of greed,
Hmm.
and I say, okay, if I do this, God, you have to do this,
Right.
that, and I'm like, no, that doesn't work that way.
No. Okay,
So
so let's go back. I want to understand as well as I can understand it. You said in 88 is when you started going to Bethel, am I right?
we went to Bethel in April of 1988.
Okay, who was the pastor then?
The pastor was Ray Larson.
And he was
And
there until Bill Johnson, or was there somebody else?
he left in 1995, and then Bill came in 1996.
I didn't know he came
And
in 96. I thought he came like 93 or 94 or something, but
no, now Bill's dad Earl was a pastor of Bethel, I think, in the late 70s. I couldn't be sure on that.
okay.
I think Bill was on the staff of Bethel, and then Earl did he promoted, for lack of better words, in the Assemblies of God, and they had to vote between Bill and someone else. They chose someone else, and Bill then moved to Weaverville, and then whoever this other pastor was, I don't know how long that person was there, and then I believe Ray Larson came after that, and then Ray stayed till 1995, left, and then Bill came. They asked Bill to come in the fall of 1995, and he officially came over. I think he officially came to Bethel in 1996.
So his becoming the pastor was very close to the time of him going to Toronto and being affected by Randy Clark and all of that.
As far
Correct?
as I know, yes.
Yeah.
I think they went to Toronto in '95.
Yeah.
Um, the Like I had emailed you, once I got on the board, um, Bill wanted us to read a couple of books. One of which was called "The Father's Blessings" by John Arnott, and it was basically an explanation of what was going on at Toronto,
Hmm.
trying to explain some of the weirdness.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I read that. I saw some videos. Like, okay, this was all new to me. And we're like, okay, could this be God? I don't know. Probably part of me is like, I don't know if God would be barking like a dog or roaring like a chicken. It just was. But the way they explained it, you went, okay, well, it kind of calmed down the waters a little bit, but there
Yeah.
was this undercurrent of something's not right here.
There's those. I like to use the word thought stopping devices
Ooh, good. Yeah.
because, like if you say you don't want to blaspheme the Holy Spirit, well, you create a version of what that means that applies to the thing you want to continue.
Yeah.
So when people do really peculiar, even offensive things that seem to be very humiliating to the person, when they're crawling on the floor and they're flopping
Yeah.
around and they're making animal sounds or they're shaking violently, you say, oh, that's the Holy Spirit. He's doing that. And, you don't want to blaspheme the Holy Spirit. So then people are all of a sudden thinking, oh, I'm sorry. That's a legitimate thing for a Christian
Yeah.
not to want to blaspheme God, but you've been taught that these weird manifestations are being caused by the Holy Spirit. Whereas
Yes.
the natural inclination, especially I think of a Christian who really is filled with the Holy Spirit, would be to go, that doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem like God. And so you have to
And
actually create a new idea to block the natural idea that I think is really being inspired by first common sense, and on top of that, by the actual Holy Spirit.
yeah, and I can't tell how many times I would say something, and I'd get our minds are at war with God. I'm like,
Yep.
yeah, but God gave me a brain to use, not to just. And the other thing that really, and at first I embraced it wholeheartedly. I mean, I shook, I fell down. Don't think I barked, uh, but part of it for me, and I'm just talking about me, was I wanted people to think that God was working in my life,
Hmm.
and when you think about it, it's about me. You know,
Huh.
I wanted to be the cool kid. Look at that, God! Oh, God's all over him, and that you would when you hear someone say that, you're like, oh, okay, this must be God. When you have a person in position of authority as a pastor or associate pastor, or someone that's been in church and they go, oh yeah, that's God. You're like, oh, okay, and it short circuits the thinking process that you're going through. Um, so yeah, I mean, I shook, I rattled, I rolled. A lot of times it was I didn't want whoever the speaker was that was praying for me. I didn't want them to feel I was not spiritual,
Right.
or I didn't want to disappoint them, or everybody else is falling. I don't want to be the one stuck in the middle of the room standing, so I'll fall down too.
This is good old
I'm
fashioned
just
peer pressure.
I'm just being honest. It just was, and that's just what I was going through. I can't speak to the person to my left or right.
Right.
Um, that's just what I was doing. Um, there were one or two times maybe that something happened to me, and I'm like, where did this come from? Um, I remember one time I was getting ready to leave, and I just kind of fell to my knees. It was a church service, and I just fell to my knees. I'm like, what in the world is this all about? And I honestly, I didn't feel anything weird. It was more of this, okay, what just happened? I mean, I ate dinner. My blood sugar's okay, stuff like that. And I didn't feel it didn't feel evil, but it didn't feel like, okay, this is God. It just was one of those, and I may never know until I get to heaven what exactly that was.
It's important, I think, because in my relationship with Paulette, she was the one who had the spiritual experiences at the charismatic churches and charismatic events. And I thought, that's my wife who I trust,
Yeah,
and I'm not going to question what she maybe has experienced or what has happened to her, and neither did she. And then years later, as we started, like, yeah, but what do we know for sure about any of this?
yeah,
And I gave her a lot of space to think through that. And we're at the place now where she's really comfortable saying, I don't know what some of those things were, and maybe I never will, and that's okay. If we base our faith on God's word first and foremost,
yeah,
and our experiences are way further down the line in terms of importance, we don't have to know exactly why certain things happened, or
right. Right.
Is it possible that even in these churches with really weird and sometimes even heretical teachings that people still sometimes get healed by God? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Could be.
Absolutely. God is sovereign.
Yeah.
God does what he will do. God knows
That's why
what's
he's
going
God.
on. Yeah, he knows what's going on inside of each of us, and we're all
Yeah.
at different places. And I don't know. I kind of go back and forth between being just really angry and want to just shut these people down completely, and then I'm thinking, everybody's kind of on their own. They got to figure this stuff out in their own time, and for many people, it takes a very, very long time before they finally
I
say, "Yeah, I don't think I want to do this anymore."
so what encourages me is, I felt this something's not right for decades,
Hmm.
um, and now I see in the last 5 years, maybe, with the advent of social media, YouTube, people like you, people like Bezel
Bezel
three,
T3.
T3. What I'm seeing is my polite leader. More of the stuff is getting out there and exposing this for what it is. And I think people are becoming more and more aware. Um, my wife watched American Gospel with me, and I was kind of like, "Oh, okay, cool," And so uh, stuff like that that's coming out, the stuff's getting exposed. Um, a lot of people probably don't like that.
Yeah.
And like the example I gave to you the other day, if you have a electrical fire in your house, okay, you may not see smoke, you may not see flame, but hey, there's something wrong, and you're going to call 911. I'm going to show up in my fire engine, and I'm not going to just kick the door down and start spraying water everywhere in the hopes that somehow I'm going to put the fire out, because I'm going to cause a lot of water damage. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to start investigating and looking
Hmm.
with my eyes and hearing and using my brain. Where is the problem? And then I may have to start tearing part of your wall out to get to the wiring. I've done that on fires, and people get upset with me. Why are you destroying my wall? I got to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, your house is going to burn to the ground. And so I think what I'm seeing with what you guys are doing, and is there's this, some people react, they don't like it, but it's so necessary for it to happen. Otherwise, it's all going to burn to the ground. Yeah.
And the church history completely from the New Testament to today has been a history of going in the wrong direction and being corrected, going in the wrong direction and being corrected. The New Testament was written largely as a corrective measure. Those writings were written not just because it was a bunch of nice things to say. It was
Yeah.
some nice things to say for sure. The gospel message about Jesus dying for our sins on the cross to atone for our sins, all that's there.
Yeah.
And then there's like, don't do that, don't believe this. All the parameters of Scripture are constantly trying to keep us away from these errors. And it's
Yeah.
amazing to think that now somehow we don't have to worry about error anymore. We can just say, hey, I think it's God, and it kind of feels like it might be God. It's not in the Bible. In fact, it kind of goes against some of the things in the Bible, but hey, that's okay because
Yeah.
we're pretty sure it's God. I mean, that's so foreign to the Christian church.
Well, most people, guilty as charged, really don't read their Bibles or study them. And I know in Bethel's case, the Bible they have is probably the Passion Translation, which, eh,
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, yeah, I won't even go there. That's just,
It's not a real
so,
Bible.
no, no. Anyway, where were we?
Let's go. Let's go to the. I'm trying to think of a nice way to put the not the elephant in the room, the Chris Valentin in the room.
Okay, okay. First up, um, I do love the man. Uh, he helped fund me getting to Spain.
Hmm.
He but we have gone toe to toe numerous times. And, you know, Chris showed up about the summer of 1996, and he would show up on the Sunday evening services. He still lived in Weaverville.
How far away is
And
Weaverville from
it's
Reading?
about an hour. It's about an
Okay.
hour west of Reading. It's a mountain town.
Yeah.
Logging industry was big in that town. So, and I think he had a auto parts store in town in Weaverville there, and he
Yeah.
was going to open one up here in Reading. So anyway, he started showing up, and then Bill started asking him to speak or give a word or something like that. And he, we hit it off okay. It was, you know, not like this instant friendship, but it was like, okay. But he then started showing up at board meetings. And, you know, Bill said, I've invited Chris to listen in. And this kept, and board meetings were once a month, and this kept occurring. And some of us were like, well, if we read the what's the word I'm looking for, the charter or the
Bylaws?
bylaws of the church, the board meetings are between the pastor, associate pastors, and the board of elders, and then anybody doing recording, writing stuff down. And so we were like, well, why is Chris showing up? And it was the answer we were given. Well, he's probably going to become a member, and he just wants to get a feel of what's going on. I'm like, well, if he's becoming a member, that's great, but where in the bylaws it says a member can attend? I mean, unless they can, if they submit to the board, hey, there's something I need to discuss, it gets put on the agenda.
Right.
And so Chris was was giving his input on some agenda items that I felt were not his place to give his. He was just giving his opinion, but it was also, there was some weight to it because you know, Bill asked him to be there. So
And
anyway,
his relationship to Bill goes back to Weaverville.
yes,
And was he ever on staff in any official capacity or on the board at the church in Weaverville with Bill?
I don't know that.
Okay.
I don't know. I think I don't know if he was on staff. I know he was a major part of the church there.
Sure.
Um,
But
anyway,
so let me see if I understand correctly that Bill comes, he's a new pastor, and almost immediately Chris comes as well. He starts
within a
being
few months, yeah,
okay, so he's
yeah,
being invited by Bill to some of the services to actually speak at the services at Sunday
yeah,
night, and he's also being asked or invited by Bill to sit in on meetings where he's not officially even a part of the church, let alone one of the
correct,
elders or anything.
correct,
Okay.
yeah. So that and so then Chris came to the board. I think it was, this is a while back. I think it was the fall of '96. Could have been early '97 with this idea of a Bethel School. And my first reaction is we had a elementary school, kindergarten through sixth grade. We don't need another school. Well, he was talking about Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry. Yeah. So he laid it out. There was some discussion, pretty lively discussion about it. He's laying out what he sees it happening. My first question to him was, how much is this going to cost? Because they're at this, I don't know if people realize that people were leaving Bethel a lot because they didn't like what they were saying.
You know what?
So,
Let me stop you on that thought because the big church I was going to here in Madison, which was very influenced by Bill and Chris's teaching, I talked to one of the pastors there who I don't want to make this story too long, but basically,
We can edit it.
no, it's just it's a tangent. But I want to talk about how what happens in Bethel has a huge influence that cannot be measured because it's not official. There's just
Mm.
people taking these ideas and running with them. Well, here in Madison, at this church, which had become influenced by Bill and by Bethel, the music pastor at the time took me to lunch and said, I just had a meeting with a young worship leader at a smaller church who has just started implementing Bethel's concepts and ideas. I don't know if one of the pastors went to Bethel and went to one of those training things or something, but whatever the case, this older worship pastor who I was friends with was saying, I am dumbfounded at how flippant this guy was because their church had just been reduced to half its size in a matter of weeks, and he was proud of it. They
Yeah.
were they were like, yes, a lot of people are leaving. This is a sign that we're doing it right according to the Bethel way of doing things. You
Yeah.
get rid of all those non-Bethel people, and you kind of, you know, get
Yeah.
almost proud of the fact that people are leaving.
Now, if I could interrupt, I will say this: the people that left, Bill would not allow anybody to say anything bad about them, and he would say, "Okay, they're leaving because of various reasons, and we need to not speak evil." So
Good
I'll
for
give
him.
it.
Yeah,
I applaud him for that. He says we need to bless them because they're trying to find their way. So I give him hats off to that.
and that's
But
a
yeah,
good.
there was a
That's an example of it's good that he does that. Absolutely. The
yeah.
the the point that has to be made is that there are so many fundamental teachings of Bethel
That
that are flawed,
yes,
and you get those teachings out there to this broader audience of people who are less mature and more maybe irrational or more spontaneous, and they think,
yeah,
oh, I think I know what he means, and they go off, and it actually it
yeah,
gets worse real fast.
yeah.
So, but you're right. I
And
appreciate you giving credit to Bill where credit is due. That's very important.
but what you said earlier was people are proud that okay, we lost half our congregation. It's almost
Hmm.
like a badge of honor. No,
Right.
you need to stop and say what's going on here. When I'm on a fire and something's going south, I need to stop and reevaluate. Um, and all this stuff's going on, and people are, like you said, starting to be proud of this. And even though Bill's saying no, we're not gonna, we don't want to go there. People are still, that's the reaction. Well, that needs to be addressed by the leader, and it never was.
Hmm.
And that's one thing I noticed was Bill does not like conflict. Um, in all my years I've known him, he's not. I mean, honestly, there are very few times I enjoy doing it, but it has to be that. If you're going to be a leader, you have to
Yes.
deal with the bad stuff along with the good stuff. And if all you want to have is the good stuff, then you're not a leader. That's just my personal opinion.
Well, and this takes us back to the peculiar relationship between Bill Johnson and Chris Valentin. It seems
Yes,
like Chris is the guy who is almost at the same level as Bill, but he's the guy out there doing the hard stuff and kind of being the bully somewhat behind the scenes who has more power than it appears from the outside.
yes, yeah. I would totally agree with you. I mean, the joke was Chris came here to do Bill's, you know, confrontations for him. And it was that when I started realizing, I go, wait a minute, that's not being a leader. That's not being a pastor, you know. And then we got this. So Chris comes down and he becomes all of a sudden the prophet. And so he's, you know, he's saying things and doing things that people are finding offensive. I mean, like I wrote you, there were some things that I questioned him on in the board meetings, and he didn't like that. But yeah, you're right. He was the guy that would come in because Bill doesn't want to confront, so he'll do that for Bill. Bill's a very private person. and people were wanting to go to Bill for counseling, or they had something serious in their lives, and they needed to talk. And so that's one of the reasons he brought Danny Silk down from Weaverville. Danny became the family pastor, and you have Chris as the prophet, and then Bill. Now all of a sudden, Bill is now in the apostolic mode, and I'm like, what is this all about?
Yeah.
To me, it was an excuse not to do what's expected of a senior pastor. Well, remove the label of pastor and put apostle, and then you go, oh, okay, we fixed it. No. And it was really people were getting frustrated from what I heard and what I saw, because it just was not very family oriented. Everything's about signs and wonders in physical healing. And then about that time, that after Chris got here, is about, I think Danny came about a year later, maybe. But in that time frame, Bill had the board read these 3 books about William Branham. I can't. I was looking through all my stuff to see if I had them still, and it looked like they were published in the 70s. They were paperback books, but I read these books, and it's a biography about Branham. I'm like, this guy was whacked.
He was a total cult leader and fraud.
He was whacked, and I'm like, is anybody else on the board thinking this way? And I think there was, like, I won't name names, but there was about 2 or 3 of us that were like, this man was not godly, and we just can't look the fact that he had miracles. That's not a qualification to be of God. And anyway, so it just was. It was very frustrating for me to hear every Sunday preaching about physical healing this, signs and wonders to the exclusion of everything else. So getting back to Chris, they started the Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry. I think they had 35 students the first year, and the promise that Chris had made was it would not be a impact on the general fund, because there was hardly any general fund left because everybody was leaving. And I think the school had to do a very short term, like a 14-day. The church had to loan the school for a certain amount of money for 14 days. The school had the money coming. They were going to pay it back. But because of that, because Chris had promised there would not be an impact, we had a special board meeting, and some of us kind of took him to task that what you promised and what happened, and he got pretty defensive. And at one point I said, just chill, dude. I mean, we're asking some legitimate questions, and this is, it's just business. It's not personal. It's like, there was always been this kind of undercurrent of tension between Chris and I, and I don't know if he saw me as a threat with his relationship with Bill. I don't know. Like I said, after I retired, my 3 years was up, I got word from about a half a dozen different people at different times that Chris wasn't happy, and he called me stupid. So I went to confront him on that, and he said, "No, I didn't call you stupid. I said you acted stupidly in this case." And he goes, "There's a difference." I go, "Well, you still use the stupid word." And so I went to an associate pastor at the time. I don't want to name him. And I said, "Hey, here's what went down, and help me out. Help me navigate this." He goes, I'm gonna go to Bill, because you're not the only one that had problems." He goes, I'm tired of hearing Chris, abuse people. So he went to Bill, and nothing came of it. And a month later, this pastor moved to Southern California.
Which is the common story. There are, from what you've told me, everybody who was there who was prominent as a staff member isn't there anymore. Who's left?
Yeah, for people that were there before Bill, they're all gone for the most part, except one, Dan Fairley. Dan Fairley was there before Bill came.
Oh,
So yeah, Dan was the college and career pastor, and I had no idea what that meant at the time before Bill came. Um, Anyway, I will tell you, if you approach the people that left and ask them, tell me why you left,
hmm
they're not going to tell you why publicly, or especially if they know you. Uh, but I know, kind of hesitant to name the names, but oh well. I know Banning Leifsher moved to Sacramento from Redding because of Jesus culture, um, partly because of Chris. Um, Other people that were assistant ministers, associate ministers, they all left. Chris was involved in one way, shape, or form.
yeah.
The only person that told me, that confirmed that it was a problem with Chris, was Danny Silk. And he said he had gone to Chris because Chris had offended somebody, and said, you need to fix this and make amends. Chris wouldn't do it. Danny went to Bill, said, Chris needs to fix this. Bill wouldn't do anything. Danny left. He went to Sacramento, joined with Jesus culture. Um,
I want to mention something. I made a video two 2.5 years ago. I forget the exact time frame, and I want to remake it. So the interview we're doing right now obviously isn't going to be up by the end of the day. I have to edit it together and
that's
stuff.
fine.
But it was called "Jesus Wants You to Be a Narcissist." Chris Valentin, and it's just an evaluation of a speech he gave at one of their conferences, and it's one of the most horrendous things I've ever heard in the name of Christianity. He's literally telling people that Jesus wants you to be proud and puffed up and really pleased with yourself. He wants you to be a
Yep.
narcissist. And when the disciples were fighting over which one is the greatest one of us, Chris Valentin says that's because they had just spent time with Jesus. And because they had spent time with Jesus, they were puffed up and proud of themselves more than usual. And that's a good
Yeah,
thing. It's the most absurd, offensive,
it is.
blasphemous, anti-Christian teaching I can
Yeah,
imagine without just, being an absolute, anti-Christian. It's teaching a version of Christianity that is the complete opposite of Christianity. And I made that video the way I do all of these. I listen to what they say, sentence by sentence. I'm not just doing a broad brush. I'm dissecting what they say, word by word, sentence by sentence, thought by thought. And I kept thinking, I've got to get more people to hear this.
yeah,
This is horrible.
yes, it
This
is.
is the electrical fire. There's smoke coming out of the wall. You better tear that wall out right now because this building's going down if this is
Yeah.
allowed to continue. So I I, I am not worried about you bringing up the issue of some of these character flaws in Chris and the way he has offended and harmed
Yeah.
relationships because I think it's a part of his theological foundation.
Yes.
His theological foundation makes it seem like it's okay to be that way. It's okay to bully people. It's okay to be proud and to always want to get your way and not to have anybody around you who might, instruct you otherwise, like he did with you.
And it's just, and this isn't me. Just I'm angry at Chris. Or like I said, I love the man, but what I see his behavior and what is said from the pulpit, totally opposite.
Hmm.
They talk about a culture of honor, and and shortly after Chris and Danny were all together with Bill, now we're seeing Danny still come out with his culture of honor thing, and you can boil it. For me, you boil it down to it is that means you cannot criticize your leaders. I've heard so many people go, well, I just want to honor that person and not. I go, well, stop using honor as an excuse for not correcting bad behavior.
Yes, that's the key element. You can honor somebody at the same time. You can say, I have a legitimate disagreement with you based on what it says in the Bible.
Right.
And if you say, I have to honor you even when I see you disregarding God's word, that's not honor anymore. That's a cult. That's being part of a
Yeah.
cult where you value the people in the head of the organization more than you actually honor God himself and his
Yeah.
word.
And then Chris came out shortly after that with, I don't know if it was a book or a handbook called The Supernatural Ways of Royalty or
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that. And I remember reading this going, okay, so basically between the culture of honor, this book, and there's no way they're absolutely forbidding us to question what we see in our leaders. Because Chris was saying, we're never supposed to live in a democratic republic. We're supposed to live under a theocracy. And I'm like, well, yeah, that'll happen when Jesus comes back. But in the meantime, who's speaking for the King of Kings? You? I don't think so.
He would say, yes, I am, because that's what it
Yeah.
means to be an apostle.
Yes. And so, anyway, yeah, this is all going on. This what we're talking about is happening through years and years of stuff, and people are some of them are devastated by, and his nature's kind of, he's a very abrupt person. He can be, but it's people were just really their lives were messed up because of his actions and his behavior, and nothing was done about it. And that's what frustrated me to death.
Right.
And it's just I just see that he had to be a kind of person that has to have his fingers on almost every aspect of what was going on in the church, and be it Bethel School Supernatural Ministry, Bethel Church, Bethel Christian Schools, Bethel Music. He was involved somewhat in trying to fix some, because when Jesus culture started getting big and Bethel Music was getting big, now we have, two dogs sharing a doghouse, and there's not enough room. And so Chris was trying to fix it and just made a disaster of it. But the frustrating thing is that everybody realizes that, but it will never be acknowledged.
And the church is continuing to grow. Bethel is building a new building now, right?
Correct. We'll see what happens. My personal belief, I think it's if you don't have a good foundation, especially in your doctrine, I mean, you build this way, sooner or later the law of gravity is going to take over. And my opinion, I don't think if they build that building that they're going to have the financial resources. I don't know. I may be totally wrong, but It's just what I've seen there. And I'll send you that picture I was telling you about it. When you walk into the lobby of Bethel Church, you see this huge banner picture, and it's from Chris Valentin. Why they have to build a new church, and you read it, and it's just all about us and what we got to do and this and that. And there's nowhere in there is there any biblical reference, or it's about world changers and building leaders. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm also to the point I enjoy calling that stuff out.
It does take certain types of personalities. The kind of person you want to have. Well, if you imagine a really effective board of elders, there should be somebody who's really good with numbers, who's very detail oriented, very steady, that kind of a scientist, researcher type of person, engineer. But then you also need to have somebody who's kind of a skeptic, who says, that doesn't seem like a good idea. Can we question this a little? There needs to be the composite of a board of elders should have all those personalities functioning together. And if you only have yes men, the elders are just there to make the congregation feel comfortable. and to allow the congregation to think, oh, it's okay, there's elders doing something somewhere, when in fact the elders are just there as props to make
Yeah.
it seem like there's a democratic process going on when there really isn't.
And again, I was a great example of what you're saying. And I looked at a lot of what I saw and compared it to my career as a firefighter. So uh, I'm on a large fire. We got 1,000-acre fire. I can't see what everything's going on. Okay, so I'm going to put Steve Kozer up on that ridge with a portable radio, and I'm going to say, "Tell me what you see, and if there's anything going on that I need to know about, let me know." And if you're just going to sit there and say, "Yeah, it's all great, it's all great," you got spot fires and you got flare-ups and you got, there's a problem. You're not telling me, shame on you.
Yeah,
But if you do tell me, hey, we got a problem, and I don't do anything about it, that's on me.
interesting.
That's on me.
I like your firefighter analogies.
Yeah, well, one reason is every time throughout the country, if there's a fire service major injury or death, there's always an investigation. They've also come up with common denominators of tragedy on fires, and the big one, there's a lot of them, but they call the number one thing is lack of communication. That's in every
Interesting
incident of firefighter fatalities, be it on a wildland fire, a house fire, a Walmart on fire. If there's something happens, and a lot of times you'll hear the investigators quote, "There was a lot of talking, but there was no communication."
Boy, this is so true in a church, in a marriage, in a family.
Yes.
In a business, communication, yeah. The ability to freely communicate what you really think might be wrong or what you really think might need correction.
Yeah. So I'm seeing all that. It's just not sitting well with me, and I'm just like, oh. So when my time for the board was over, I was done. I don't want to be involved in this because in my opinion, I could see where it was going. There was going to be a bunch of people, good guys, but they're all going to go, yes, sir, 3 bags full, no matter what, And I'm like, I can't do that. I have to have input from different sources telling me this is what's going on, So speaking of fire, and Chris was it was
2017, 18?
2018, summer 2018.
The
we
car
had a car
fire.
Yeah. Oh boy. I mean, I was retired by then. My oldest son works for the state. He's with CAL FIRE. He was on that fire. Rabbit trail, when I hear all these people, the dead men saying how they made declaration, all these other intercessor type people saying, we decreed and declared and the fire no longer was a threat to Reading. Like, well, my first question is, why did you wait until the fire threatened the city?
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't you make your declarations that very first afternoon? Why did you wait? Secondly, what you're claiming that the fire no longer threatened the city and the wind stopped is patently false. There's 14 days of documents showing how the city was still under a threat after that fire tornado had gone through and caused all the damage. And then, did I send you that screenshot of my son? Because he was involved in this. And and he says, of all you people that are trying to get into second heaven to fight the fire demon,
right.
If you get stuck, you're on your own. We don't have ladders tall enough. And so it kind of hit home. He's out there putting his tail on the line, and he was telling me things. I'm like, I've never done that in my 30 years.
Wow.
And it was like, and I'm grateful for everybody that prayed for the firefighters and the law enforcement. But I'm hearing him tell me this, and then he sees this nonsense about declarations, decrees. it really made him angry and frustrated him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I had to tell him, look, don't even look at that right now. You've got a job, your crew, your fire engine. You just concentrate on that. Don't be distracted by this, because otherwise you're not going to be effective.
Yeah.
But as a dad, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
As a dad and as a retired firefighter, that just frustrated me to no end. Making these claims and declarations, and I'm like, you know what, I can make, and someone that I thought was a pretty rational person came up to me and said that fire tornado was a demon. And I go, no, it was a vortex of wind called a tornado that just happened to occur on a fire. And I said, if you look at all the weather data and all the other factors, geography and temperature and everything, it all combined to become the perfect storm. And they're like, no, it was a demon. I go, no, it wasn't. It was nature. And he goes, well, it's a demon because we've never seen that before. I go, we've never seen it recorded. Doesn't mean it's never happened.
Yeah.
So,
I've used that clip in some of my videos, the fire NATO, because of these, Heidi Baker always fire. Well, you got your fire. Yeah. They want fire, and then they don't want fire. Make up your mind, people, because we gave you a fire NATO. You should have been thrilled.
So during the car fire, the church asked me. I think Bill was out of town, Chris was out of town. There was it might have been Dan Fairley or somebody said, we're thinking about opening the church as an evacuation center, one of the evacuation centers. I said, don't do it, because first off, Interstate 5, which the church is right next to, it's the big 4-lane. That was a contingency line, and I said, if we get another tornado event, we're not in good shape. Plus, there's only one way in and one way out of that church, and that's not good. So they decided to become a distribution center for the Salvation Army, the Red Cross, to accept donations for the people that lost their homes. So they asked me to be part of that in the sense I was just going to advise them, this is what the fire is doing, and this is how you can schedule your week, okay? Because they shut down services. They didn't have any Sunday morning services, and they shut that down so that people could come in. And then hats off to them for that. Side note: one of their classes they teach on Sunday mornings is called fire starters. And so we're letting all these people in, and there's this huge sign, fire starters this way. I took the sign and I put it in the closet. I go, oh no, no way. I said, first of all, there is no class today, and we are not putting this sign out to people that just lost everything. Okay, bad move. So, I mean, that's kind of a humorous thing, but I was there just to advise them. And after, I think about a week, Bill was able to get back in town. Eric got back in town. Chris Kent got back in town, so stuff like that. Well, about week 2, as Chris and I are chatting, or we walk by in the hallway, he's making these little comments about, well, we're not going to need you much longer. We don't need you. And he would look at me and he goes, what are you doing here? And and I had a little name tag they put up with there that said technical specialist, which is, and the reason I had him put that is because that is a title that fire service people would recognize. They wanted to send someone to the fire camp, to the incident base, to just update what the fire team, what Bethel was doing. They were going to call it the testimony pastor. I said, no, you want to call it a public information officer, because that's what they recognize. We need to use terminology that everyone will recognize. So I had this badge saying technical specialist, and Chris kept saying, what is that? What are you doing here? I'm like, no, I'm just advising. He pointed, he goes, what does that mean? I'm like, well, it's technical, but it's special. And it drove him nuts. It just because this was an area he could not control.
Interesting.
He had no, and I wouldn't expect him to have any background on fires. He did say, I was in Weaverville when that fire happened, in 1995. Yeah, I remember. I was on that fire. So it. And what got back to me was apparently there was a staff meeting, and Chris had mentioned that we're not going to need Mark Mack for much longer. And Bill spoke out and said, "We're going to keep Mark Mack on as long as we need to until he says, okay, we need to, shut down the distribution center or ramp it down like that." So Bill stuck up for me, but it was during that time that I was in the office area, and I heard I had to go see one of the associate pastors, and I heard yelling. And I walked into this associate pastor's office, and the yelling was coming from Chris. And he walked out. I don't even think he saw me, and he said, "I don't ever want to hear this happening again, blah, blah, blah." And he stormed out, and this poor guy's face was just beet red. And I mean, it was a very awkward moment, and I'm like, I looked at him and I go, "Was that a butt chewing?" Sure sounded like a butt chewing to me. He started to laugh, But I'm like, 3 weeks later, Chris is talking about honor and honoring each other. I'm like, you just totally embarrassed this guy in the office. Everyone heard it. I go, that is so hypocritical. So, okay, yeah, that was another tangent we went down. So,
I think it's. I know there's going to be people who are like, why are you telling these personal stories? Because, now you're just being critical of a man. But when you have that kind of power and that kind of ability to influence literally countless people around the world, as Chris Valentin does, his character should be called into question. And if he has character flaws, and if he especially has theological flaws, and the two are kind of merged, it seems like, with him.
Yeah.
And who was the guy? Chris Roseborough just did a video about him. The guy in Southeast. Not Perry Noble. That's another guy who just got defrocked in the last few years.
Oh.
Stovall Weems.
Yes.
The common thread amongst almost all of these super mega pastor guys is they have a personality flaw, character flaw, a flaw of I'm a control freak. I want to lord it over others. I want to tell everybody else what to do. All of those things, and on top of that, Bethel does have a dominionist theological foundation to everything they do, and I am not a dominionist. I don't think it's healthy for Christians to be, we are supposed to take over the 7 mountain mandate, and it's really embarrassing. One of the things that I hope that our channel does is we as Christians can admit there are things within the supposedly Christian church that we do not agree with, and we will speak out against it.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird thing to say, but some of my favorite comments on our YouTube channel are from atheists who say, "Thank you for speaking out against these things." Because when we speak out against them, it's kind of expected, but it means a lot more when Christians are speaking out against things they know are really harmful within their own circles.
My whole problem when I first heard of this Dominion 7 mountain mandate thing is like, I don't see anywhere in the Gospels where Jesus says that's how it's going to be at the end of days. It's the opposite. And he said, they're going to hate you because they hate me. Right. And they're persecuting you. Don't be surprised that they persecuted Jesus. Don't be surprised they persecute you. And I'm like, this does not line up. And now I'm all for being in your field of work, be the best you can.
Sure.
And show honor and love and integrity. You know, I had to learn how to do that at a fire station and being a state employee where you can't bring in God. You cannot mention
Yeah.
that, but you could still show care and love and integrity. And, and I've got firefighters to this day that just, they'll stop me and say, man, I so enjoyed being with you. I knew if you were going to give me a butt chewing, it was for my benefit. And I go, he goes, I didn't enjoy it. I go, yeah, I know, but I did. Because if I see my firefighters doing something that's going to get them hurt, I'm not going to just say, well, let's just honor them in their walk. I'm going to yell stop as loud as I can, and I'm going to screech it at them to get their attention, to get them to stop.
It's interesting because the analogies to firefighting, they really do apply to the church. And yet, I think foundationally, Bethel has a reputation for being the place where it's very lighthearted and there's no condemnation about anything. And if you're going to prophesy, you're only going to speak about good things. That's instructed. The prophets of today, they don't say anything about sin or correct people when they're going off the path. You only talk about the good things that are coming. And that's the very definition of a false prophet.
We just want to call forth the gold in people's lives.
Yeah. That was also in that Chris Valentin, Jesus Wants to Make You a Narcissist video. He talked about that as well. So, hey, you know what? Let's be done with this episode and let's do another one of these. And we'll. I know
I'm having so much fun.
I know you have more background and stories, and we can mull some other ideas over. But this has been really great. And again, everybody who's listening, I want you to look at all the resources. I'm going to put a bunch of things in the description below, other articles, other videos. There's a whole playlist of videos. If you're offended by what we're saying, I understand. And I just want to challenge you or encourage you to think, but maybe these guys are telling the truth. And if we're not telling the truth, let us know. But I think we are. I think we really are. And telling the truth is what Christians should be doing, even when it kind of hurts. Just like getting the firefighter to stop the fires the right way so that they don't get hurt and other people don't get hurt. I think that's a really good analogy to what you're trying to do, Mark. So, thanks so much.
All righty, buddy.
Basta!
You feel that just lifting. It's lifting.